Okay, it's time to begin. And to be honest, well, first things first, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me at whatever time of day it is for you, wherever you are in the world. We have people who are up very early in the morning. We have people who are up much, much later at night. I am just super grateful to everyone for taking part. I'll be honest, I'm like a little nervous. This is kind of a bizarre, wonderful, weird, amazing thing that we're all going to do together. And I'm kind of shocked that no one's really tried to do this before, but here we are. So, okay, a few things to talk about. Hopefully, everyone who's watching, who's taking part, you have weighed out your coffee beans, right? You're prepped, you're ready to go. I still have beans here. I'm going to grind in a little bit. And you've made up your third wave water. You've made your sachet, you've dissolved it in distilled or deionized water, and that should be in the kettle. Hopefully, you've also got something like this, which is some sort of thing on which you can take notes, right? It's just helpful, like an aide-memoire. It's not a test. We're going to say that quite a lot today. It's not a test. This is fun. Today is fun. There's no right or wrong here. We're just going to have some fun. So, if you haven't done that, please, please, please do that now. Get prepped up. I'm going to do a couple of quick sort of housekeeping bits right at the start. So if you haven't weighed your beans out, go quickly, weigh some beans out. So a couple things. One, this was a kind of giant logistical effort. We didn't know quite what we were getting into. If you're curious, we have sent out 3,500 packs to people all around the world, which is way more than we thought. And we are like a little company, and so to logistically produce 3,500 times 5 samples of coffee has been really difficult. To try and get that to people has been really tricky. We tried to send it so there was enough time to get there, but it wouldn't be too far off roast. If you're watching this and your set hasn't arrived, I'm so sorry. Please let us know. Hit reply to your initial confirmation email. We want to make it right. We want to make sure you have a good time. It looks like lots have made it, so thank you so much. Secondly, the chat's going to be pretty busy today, right? And I'm going to miss loads of questions. Now, I have Jem helping me. You'll see her in the chat. Here's the deal. I'll try and answer questions as I go if they're relevant to what I'm doing. If you 100% want your question answered, you can use the super chat feature. That does typically mean a donation to the creator. However, if anyone uses super chat today, that money will be donated to World Coffee Research, who are kind of investing in the future of coffee, and an organization I'm very sort of excited by and pro. So any money that goes through super chat will go to World Coffee Research, not to me. Okay, now, here's how it's going to go. In a minute, we're going to start grinding some coffee, and that's going to be good. And I have a grinder next to me over here. When I'm grinding, I'm not going to talk too much because it's going to be noisy. So occasionally I'll stop talking. Once we've ground our coffee, then we're going to start our kettles. Right, and I know all our kettles won't boil simultaneously. I've set myself to be a little bit slower than most people, but as soon as your water boils, you can start pouring it onto your coffee and set yourself a timer. I'll have a timer running. It doesn't matter too much when we all start. We'll all start tasting together when they've had a chance to sort of brew properly and have been cleaned off and are ready to go. So do post questions into the chat. We'll try and capture what we can. We'll taste a bunch of coffee. I'll kind of guide you through the tasting process a little bit more today. I will then tell you what the coffees are. You're very welcome to guess and have some fun with that, but I will be kind of revealing those, after we've done a good round of tasting. And then after that, I'll tell you kind of what I taste, right? Like share some very basic kind of taste descriptors, just to kind of give you a benchmark. That's kind of the idea here. Now, if you work in coffee, that's amazing. You know how this is going to work. If you've been to a bunch of coffee tastings before, there's going to be no surprises here. If you've never done a coffee tasting, well, I'm thinking about you first and foremost. So, it's time for me to grind some coffee. Now, if you're grinding at home, it's perfectly okay to put in the coffee beans into the grinder, grind through, and on you go, right? And then the next coffee and then the next coffee. What we do in the coffee industry is we tend to do what we call a kind of a purge, where we grind just a few beans in between each bowl to have a kind of layer of separation, right? So if there was a defect in one of the bowls, then it wouldn't run into the next bowl and the next bowl and the next bowl. That's the sort of idea. That's not a huge concern for us today. One, because these are great coffees, and two, because this isn't an assessment of the raw coffee. The primary goal here is to use comparative tasting, to taste this against that, this against that, this against that, to develop our language and our sense of taste. So, hopefully you're all prepped and you're all ready. I'm going to go over to my grinder now and start grinding some coffees. I'm not going to be able to talk to you because the microphone's here and not over there. I'll be back with you in about a minute. Okay, let's go. I just got to comment quickly for 1 second. This is the weirdest thing in the world to do something I do all the time in this really performative way for you on the stream. But I'll let you get back to grinding. I just had to acknowledge that this is kind of a weird day and kind of fun, but let's go. Last one. Okay, so I now have my 5 coffees. They are ready to go. I lost a bean there. That's okay. So, if you have finished your grinding, my grinding probably went quicker than yours. I know some of you are probably still grinding your coffees. Don't feel stressed. Don't rush. It's okay. In a second, I'm going to go and disappear off stage and set my kettle to go. I've got quite a slow kettle though, so it's not going to happen really, really fast. Give you all a chance to catch up. Now, I could have said, grind ahead of time. And the reason I didn't is because this is one of the greatest parts of coffee, the smell of fresh ground coffee. We want to dive into that pretty quickly, right? We're going to assess that. We're going to just take note of it. You don't have to write a thing down if you don't want to, right? So before I do that, I'm going to turn my kettle on, and then I'm going to come back. And we'll just talk through the first part of a tasting, which is sort of smelling the dry grounds. It's just kind of fun. So, 1 second. Now, hopefully my kettle boiling away in the background isn't too loud. On your sheets, the sheets that we've kind of posted PDFs to, there is a section for aroma. And really, there are some scores there. You can go high or low if you want to. It's just a nice place to sort of make some notes, right? Now, I know in saying this, I'm getting us to a place where things get a little bit intense, right? We start to pull out those complicated tasting words, those fancy, somewhat pretentious, somewhat frustrating descriptors that we are all so fond of. You can write down anything you like, right? You can write good, bad, like it, hate it. It's perfectly good. You can write something completely abstract. Gwilym Davis, World Barista Champion, all-round wonderful human, once told me about a coffee tasting where someone used the descriptor late-stage Marlon Brando. And I totally get what they were talking about. You can use any language you want to communicate or remind yourself of what it reminded you of, right? That's the idea. So, have a little smell, have a little sniff, and primarily think about the difference between them. In what way do they smell similar? In what way do they smell different? And they do smell really different. And that's the good and the bad of coffee. You'll be like, that smells different, but I don't know how. Now, in terms of water temperature, don't worry too much. You're going to use the kettle just off the boil. Mine has just clicked off. So what I'm going to do is grab it. I'm going to pour my water on. And at the same time, we're going to start a timer that's going to live up here in the screen. So 1 second. Tell a lie, there's a bug with the timer, so no timer today. But we can start timers with phones. That's a pretty good way to go. We're going to be brewing for about 4 minutes. And as you pour, you're just trying to saturate all of the grounds. Now, if you want to be really precise, you can do this on a weighing scale. I'm not, because I use these cupping bowls all the time. And the glory about cupping is that while brew ratio has a big impact, this is also probably the most forgiving way to brew coffee. What you should see forming on top is a kind of a crust. That's what we call it in the industry. Some will be different between the coffees. Some will have a kind of a foamier crust than others. There we go. Now, I would recommend having some rinse water. So I'm going to use the rest of this that I'll be using to rinse spoons and that kind of stuff as I go. Hopefully you've all watched the cupping video that I made, and so none of this is new or surprising. So, there we go. Pop you down over there. Now, this is a second really great fun opportunity to assess the aroma of the coffee, right? If you get down to the kind of crust in the bowl and smell that, there are going to be some super interesting aromas coming off here. It's going to smell different to the dry grounds. Well, that's okay. Again, if you want to take notes, take notes. If you don't want to take notes, that's okay too. Again, think about contrast. How is A different to B? How is A different to C and D, right? Now, one quick tip that makes you seem a little odd, but it's always worked really well for me. When you're smelling a bunch of coffees, you can start to feel like your nose is sort of getting less and less effective, right? Everything starts to smell the same. It becomes harder to detect the differences. Essentially what's happening is that a bunch of aroma is sort of saturating your nose, and noses work best as detecting kind of contrast. That's why dogs sniff really fast, because they're constantly looking for contrast in the aromas in the air. These coffees don't contrast that much in the great scheme of things. What I often do is just have a little smell of my clothes, because my clothes are washed in, there's some sort of, not deodorant, but like a laundry powder, like laundry soap, the detergent, that's the word I want. That smells nothing like coffee. So occasionally I'll just sort of smell my shirt, which smells nothing like coffee, and it sort of turns back up the volume when I go back to smell coffee again, right? So if you feel like your nose is getting a bit saturated in coffee smell, that's a weird, useful little tip. You'll occasionally see other coffee professionals do this and you'll think they're a bit odd. That's what they're doing. It's just a nice sort of point of contrast, I guess. Where was I? Now, this is still not yet the really, really important stuff. That's going to be the tasting. But there's one more stage that we're going to talk about, which is called the break. And what we're going to do is take these crusts and we're going to stir them. Now, you'll notice not all of the crusts are the same. I suspect it's the same for you too. Some of them may have started to sink a little bit, some of them really haven't at all. If you're seeing that happen with yours, don't freak out. That's okay, that's not unusual. These coffees are both relatively light roasted, as you'll see from the beans, and also a little bit off roast too. Two factors that will cause a crust to sink down a little bit more. But when you get to 4 minutes, about 4 minutes, from pouring the water on, that's a pretty good time to break, which is about now for me. So all you're going to do, take your spoon, and you're just gently going to stir the top of the crust and smell any aromas that come off at that point. Now, pick just one glass and use that as a rinse glass at this point. This is fun, but in the great scheme of things, none of this matters compared to actually drinking, tasting the coffee, which we'll do in a little bit. Now, through the magic of coffee brewing, these brews effectively have stopped brewing. That final sort of stir knocks off any coffee at the top and it sinks and it floats down to the bottom. And that ground coffee is going to sit in this bowl the entire time. But even though we're going to taste this for half an hour, maybe, it's never going to taste over-extracted because it's pretty much stopped brewing. So don't worry about that. What we want to get rid of at this point is the stuff floating around on top. So you need 2 spoons. 2 soup spoons, 2 dessert spoons, 2 cupping spoons if you have them. And we are going to just scoop off what's on the top. Rinse our spoons. Scoop off the next one. Now, I've just seen something kind of amazing. So while I'm doing this, I should tell you, there is a world record for the largest coffee tasting. And it was in Colombia. They had a kind of coffee festival in Colombia. And about 1,650 people took part. Someone can look it up and tell me the right answer, but it's about that number. And Guinness was there, and they certified that was the largest coffee tasting ever. Now, currently, we have about 1,770 people online with us. So if you're all tasting coffee, we have a record. It's not official, Guinness can't certify it, but congratulations to us. We're now kind of record holders. So well done you for taking part in something so completely wonderful and strange, and I hope fun. So these things we can get rid of, and we're not going to jump into tasting yet because these are actually just way too hot. So we've got a little downtime, a little calm time. I can answer a few questions and talk you through what's going to happen next. So let me get rid of these. Clean up my mess. Okay, that's the hard work done. That's the hard work done. Now, if you're still catching up, don't stress about it, right? As long as you've gone through the process in the same sort of time, you're going to have a very similar experience. So that's kind of, just relax. It's okay. Don't stress. Don't go too quickly. Someone in the chat was saying that the largest was 1,559. We're more than that. Now, a quick shout out to anyone who is hosting a public version of this. If you have gone to a cafe, to a roastery somewhere in the world and are tasting with other people, that's so cool. Thank you so much. If you are sat at home on your kitchen counter with a laptop, thank you. It's just so cool. And actually, just a couple quick thank yous. I did say that this was a logistical kind of challenge for us, and we had to have some help packing the coffee, right? Because we just literally couldn't make that many bags, like 17,500 bags, is more than we can do as a small team. So thank you to Master Roast. We roasted the coffee and they packed it for us back into little sample bags and shipped it back to us. Also, big shout out to Third Wave Water, who gave us sachets so everyone could have the same water everywhere in the world. That is incredibly generous of them. I'm extremely grateful. It's kind of, it's just kind of, it's made something that seemed impossible possible. The idea that I could taste something here in London and you could taste something in El Salvador, in Colombia, in Tokyo, in Melbourne, in Milan, in New York, in Canada, in, I don't know, there's a lot of you. We sent coffee all over the world, which is kind of completely amazing. Now, somebody asked, will we be doing this again? I hope so. Like, we learned some lessons here. Like, we learned a ton about this, and it certainly raised challenges around the logistical side, which is the kind of headache. How do we get coffee to people in good time? How do we make sure that everyone who wants to take part can take part? I think there's still some questions to sort of answer there, but we hope to do it again. But yeah, don't worry if you're behind. Don't worry if you're still grinding, you're still boiling water. It doesn't matter. It's okay. I'm going to let this go probably 15 minutes from adding water to beginning to taste. So hopefully you're all okay. Now, one comment was like, if they have no crust whatsoever and it just sank to the bottom, that's a really good question. I don't know what would cause that in a sample that I wouldn't have happen here. If you're also seeing this in the chat, you know, let us know. Like, for me, I think A's crust disappeared a little bit earlier. I think one of the ones over here did as well. But it's not a sign of anything bad. Don't freak out. It's whether it floats is a mixture of density and how much CO2 is in it. So it might be a case that if you're somewhere outside of the UK, maybe, that airplane journey just pulled a bit more CO2 out of that coffee. That's a potential thing. I'm kind of guessing at this point, though. That's like not like a Hail Mary, but like a best guess. Let's call it a best guess. But let's talk about tasting. Now, hopefully, you've watched the video on tasting where I talked about these things. But that, you know, is a little bit abstract, I accept. And this is where it gets kind of more interesting, right? Like, this is where we can talk about actually what I'm tasting, what you're tasting. Now, if your grind isn't 100% identical to mine, like I, grind my coffee in an expensive commercial coffee grinder, you might have a small hand grinder at home. But with this kind of method, with this kind of infusion, it's about the most tolerant way to brew. It's about the most tolerant thing with different grind sizes. You'll see some variance of strength and extraction, right? Like a very uneven grind will produce a sort of a less pleasant, less coherent cup. But those key flavors, the key attributes that we're going to talk about, you should be able to taste those and enjoy those and detect those and understand them, which is kind of the goal here. Like I said, this is for those of you that want to develop your sense of taste. If you are a seasoned coffee professional, I don't know how much I can give you in this particular session. It'll be fun to see if your tasting notes kind of match up a little bit with mine. Now, a quick note on that, actually. There is a second link in the description of this video that takes you to a page on the Square Miles blog where there is a Google form. I've kept it pretty simple. I'll talk it through a little bit more at the end, but we would love to hear from you about what you tasted and some notes. We're not asking you to put in loads and loads and loads and loads of data because you just won't. I won't, you won't. It's too much to ask. But we'd love to hear some thoughts, a few key words around each of the coffees, if you're happy to share them. We'd also like to know how many people tasted coffee with you, whether you're a coffee person in terms of industry or not, that kind of stuff. A ranking of your favorites. But we'll talk more about that in a second. So I'm using the kind of Prufrock sheet here, which I think we've linked to a bunch in a previous video and around this kind of thing. And so there are 5 boxes here. There are 5 coffees. So I'm going to take some really, really basic notes as I go. Right? No one's going to grade this afterwards. No one's going to, get a red pen out and say you did right or wrong, or that your rating was incorrect or anything else. There are objective aspects to taste, But ultimately, it is still fundamentally extremely subjective, right? What you taste is right, is true, is honest. And while I might disagree, I don't get to be right because I've practiced this more. So you'll have noticed some different smells. For now, put smells, put descriptions, put those kind of fruit words, those caramel words, those sweet words, all of those words, put them to one side, right? Before we take a single note on this thing, right? Before you scratch a single pen or pencil mark on here, we're going to do a kind of first pass, right? Anytime I cup, I will taste all of the coffees that I'm going to taste once, just to know the lay of the land, right? Like if I'm scoring on a scale and I taste coffee 1 and I think, oh, that's got loads of sweetness, and I give it a 9 out of 10, or I score it right up high, and then my next coffee is somehow much sweeter, well, I've broken my scale already, right? But if I've tasted everything and I know roughly where things are, there's no surprises coming, it makes it a little bit easier for me to begin to take notes. So the first time we taste, we're not going to take notes. We're just going to take our time. We're going to relax. Now we're about 15 minutes in. I'll talk again about the sort of tasting thing. Now there are. I'm mostly in an empty room right now. It's kind of weird, but we wanted to keep the sound good. There are people here, though, who will yell at me or throw things at me if I do a thing, which is slurp really loudly, because no one wants that coming through their feed, into their headphones, into their speakers, right? And when you taste, slurping is a really useful way to sort of help turn up the volume on what you're tasting, right? Like by sort of spraying it as you drink it, a lot more of the aromatics become volatile, and sort of the volume gets turned up on flavor. Not on taste, which you sort of detect in your mouth. It would be things like sweetness or acidity or texture or that kind of stuff. But this is the sort of the descriptor words, the sort of the more frustrating words that we're going to come to in a little bit. So, if you're not ready yet, if you've only been brewing for like 10 minutes, again, don't stress. I'm not rushing you through this. There's no mad rush. I don't want you to stress out. One quick question from Blue Avatar, which is how much room between the bowls? I don't think it makes an enormous difference. If most of the time, if I'm smelling, I'm going to try and get my face extremely close to the bowl, so there shouldn't be much in the way of cross-contamination. If you've got a reasonably still air room, if you're cupping outside, it's breezy, all that kind of stuff, then maybe that's more of a concern. But here, there's probably a couple inches between the bowls, and that's partially for the camera. And actually, in a professional cupping, it's really more about space for multiple participants. So we'd have a bit more of a gap, but actually sometimes tables get really crowded and you'll get gaps this small between cups. It's not ideal just from a logistical perspective with a group of people around a table, but don't worry too much about cross-contamination of aroma between those things. Cool. Quick check on the other things. I see some people are starting to slurp, or are they not? If you want to start going, if you've hit 15 minutes and you want to start tasting, be my guest. Right? So, spoon, I'm going to dip it in this rinse water between bowls. There's a lot of questions around, should you share rinse water? Is that okay? I just probably have lower standards than other people, and I'm also used to sharing rinse water with my colleagues. That's kind of a thing. It does gross some people out, so if you want to keep your personal rinse water, if you're in a group, that's okay too. Again, if you want to spit, if it's 2 a.m, and I know some of you said you'd get up at 2 a.m, and wow, thank you for getting up at 2 a.m. to do this. If you don't want to drink this, you can spit it out. If you ever go to a public cupping, never put your spittoon down on the table. The potential for horror and disgustingness is just too high. So never, ever, 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 ever put your spittoon down if it's full of spit on a table. It's just not okay. That's a rule. That's my rule. That's our rule. Let's not do that. Okay, so I'm going to have a little taste. I'm not going to take a note. I'm not going to think too much about anything. I'm just going to get a little spoon on here and gently slurp it. Very quietly, very gently, because there's a microphone right here, and oof, we don't want that. And don't have an opinion. Don't start trying to analyze it yet. Taste it. It's a benchmark. It's the first thing. You can, if you want to, start thinking about how that's contrasting to the second thing you taste. and that's different. Don't think about how it's different yet. Just note this difference. Into number 3. Different again. Now, what a lot of you, I suspect, want is the ability to verbalize the way that these are different. Because you're like, yeah, I get it. This is different to that. This is different to that. But I can't tell you how. I get it. That's the bit that takes time. But comparing is definitely the way. Some of you who are asking for slurp noises on the chat, no, you don't want that. I see you. You don't want that. I promise you. There's a microphone like inches away. It would be bad. Maybe later. Okay. If you've had that initial taste, right? If you've had a chance just to say A to B, B to C, okay, I kind of get what's going to happen here. Don't worry if nothing pops as being very obvious or very clean or kind of easy to describe right now. The hotter coffee is, the harder it is to describe to taste, right? You, as a human, as an animal, your mouth works best around body temperature. This is more like 60 degrees Celsius, so it's too hot. As it cools down and gets closer to body temperature, it gets easier to taste because it makes sort of the work easier for your mouth, for your nose, for everything else, right? There are some chemical changes in the coffee as it cools, but a much bigger factor is you, and you're changing in a way, I guess. So, maybe you've got some notes on aroma, right? You might have noted whether it has a lot of aroma, whether it had a sort of subtler smell, whether that was good and whether that was bad, right? That's what the scale is for in terms of quantity and quality. Now, we're going to start with the first one on this sheet, which is acidity. Now, acidity, in theory, is a relatively simple thing. Your tongue, your taste buds on your tongue, in your mouth, they're not just on the tongue, are essentially detecting acids. They're detecting, if you want to get into it, free hydrogen ions. You tend to experience that sensation around the sides of the tongue. But the detection of it happens all over the tongue and mouth, right? Like not the sides of your mouth, not the roof of your mouth, but there are bits outside of the tongue that do have taste buds, back of the throat. But you'll experience it on the sides of your tongue. Now, when you go from A to B, all I want you to think about at this point is, does A have more acidity or does B? How is that different? Don't worry about flavor, don't worry about texture, none of that stuff. Take one attribute, acidity, and let's compare it, right? A to B. I'm not going to tell you what the answer is. I'm not going to say, I find this. I'll do it at the end, but not right now. And then again, you can go maybe C, also to B. Now, these are in an order. We thought about the order that they'd be in, and we would presume that most people would go A to B to C to D to E. But feel free to sort of bounce around. It's good, actually, it's good practice to compare sort of E to B or kind of bounce backwards and forwards. You keep asking me to slurp loudly, and I'm not going to do it yet. Towards the end, when I've prepared you adequately. One quick question on the super chat was, have I ever explored how allergies affect taste? Essentially, super quickly here, I'll talk more later, you can divide taste into two pieces, that which you detect in the mouth and that which you detect retronasally. Now, in the mouth, you would do the traditional taste, which would be salt, sour, sweet, bitter, and umami, the sort of sensation of meatiness or brothiness. There are other things you detect in the mouth, like astringency, like piquancy, like spiciness. There's obviously a taste that you detect, but we don't really include it the same way. Everything else, be it the description of, say, chocolatiness or floral sort of notes or fruitiness, all of that really happens retronasally. If you're ill, if you've got a cold, if you're suffering, then you will struggle to detect much retronasally. So you'll be able to understand the differences in taste, but not flavor, not in smell, not in aroma. So, someone's paid for a slurp. I mean, fine. You asked for it. I mean, I'll do it once. Twice, maybe. That's all you get. That's all you get. I'm really sorry if that was loud. I think It's okay. It's okay. No more of that. Okay. Once you've run through and you've made some notes on acidity, right, you can decide initially on whether you think the quantity is there. Is it high acidity, low acidity? When you go back a second time, think about how much you like that sensation of acidity. Right? A green apple is incredibly acidic, but it's great. It's really good. It's a balanced, pleasing, clean, refreshing, delightful acidity. For me, chewing a lemon is not a delightful acidity. It's an overwhelmingly sour and harsh acidity. So that's your kind of quality. Do I like how it makes me feel? Acidity in food is essential. It's a really glorious part of kind of composing flavor. And certainly coffee people really love acidity. I'll talk a bit more about why towards the end when we do a reveal. When you've done that, I want you to do the same thing for sweetness. Now, again, don't stress too much if they feel very similar. You're going to change your mind. Between starting to taste and the first time you take notes and the end, you're going to change your mind. That's normal because the coffee is going to seem to change too. You make your final decision in a coffee tasting like this when the coffees are pretty much cold. Something may taste good at the start and then fall to pieces as it cools down. Something may taste a bit boring at the start and cool and open up into something very lovely. I should probably take some notes. My delicate little slurps. Oh. Okay. Now, body is a little bit easier, and I think these coffees provide, I'm not telling you what I'm tasting, but they provide some nice contrast as you go from one to the other in terms of body, in terms of texture, right? That fullness in the mouth, that sensation. Do they feel light and delicate, or do they feel richer and a little heavier and sort of rounder? Do they feel almost spiky, or do they feel soft? You know, there's no right way to talk about texture. Some people liken it to say, like milk, be it skim milk through to full fat, is that kind of richness to that kind of lightness. There's no wrong words here. Now, one question, it's a good question. Do you need to rinse in between? And I don't think it's a bad thing to do so. I have some water with me. What I tend to find is that practically I get a little focused, right? I'm tasting. I'm just really paying attention. It's nice to sort of have a break, refresh the brain, and yeah, have a drink. It's totally okay. Still water, sparkling water, that doesn't matter too much. I wouldn't recommend much else. If you want to eat something in between tasting, you see people use just like dry bread. No butter, no fat, that would be bad. Sorry, I've just seen someone's trying to guess the coffees. I will tell you what that is, but I can't tell everyone because they'll give it away. Not yet, anyway. Anyway, so feel free to have a drink. I'm going to have a drink. It's a lot of talking today. How are we doing for time? Wow, 35 minutes in. So I saw that super chat asking about D. I'm not going to answer that yet. I'm really sorry. I hope that's okay. I don't want to talk about anything yet because I want you just to focus on taste. I will welcome your guesses later on, right? Like I want you to throw some guesses out when it comes time for the reveal. But for now, just focus on flavor, right? Focus on what you're tasting. And that does bring us to flavor, right? That brings us, oh, sorry, I skipped finish. Apologize. Finish, this is where you have to be a bit patient, right? You're going to taste something. Finish happens about now. Right? Like, what am I left with? How does this leave my tongue? What flavors sort of emanate at this point? Does my mouth feel good? That's basically it, right? Do I like how this has left me feeling? Bad espresso has the worst finish, right? We've all had bad espresso. I guarantee every single person watching this feed has had bad espresso, and you're left for like 10, 15 minutes with just like the worst finish. That's what you're kind of thinking about. Kyle, I see your comment. That's okay that you're not into something. That's okay. I should have said this at the start, actually. Kyle, this is actually a fantastic comment. It's okay, right, if you don't like anything here. I'm going to ask you about it right at the end, but it's okay if you don't like anything. It's okay if you like everything. We wanted to use some coffees that would give you contrast. That was the idea here, right? Well, I hope people enjoy them. I certainly enjoy them, but it's okay to really love something and really hate something, right? Your preference is entirely valid, even if it doesn't match someone else's, mine, your friends, your enemy. It doesn't matter, right? Like that, you like it or hate it, that's okay. I won't be upset. Knowing what you dislike is really helpful, right? It helps you prevent making mistakes in buying coffee in the future. Okay, back to this. And I want to talk about flavor. Flavor is the part that, for me in my career, was just the most frustrating thing, right? Like, I'd be reaching for a word, and I still do. I want to describe it, and I just can't. Start with big categories of flavor, right? I think fruity words generally are really useful. I see a little super chat there. Thank you for your donation. Appreciate it. There'll be guesses later. You can use colors as an adequate flavor. If you said one of them tasted really brown, that's valid. One of them tasted really green. One of them tasted really purple. All acceptable. And you can start from there and be like, okay, what is purple about it? Is it kind of a purple fruit? Is it like plummy? Is it berry-like? Is it something like that? Flavor feels like a test. Like, flavor feels like the place where you get to show off. And do you know what? It is super, super satisfying when you taste something and you describe it and everyone else is like, oh yeah, that's it. That's a good feeling. That's a fun feeling. But the reason that we don't talk when we taste is that if I said coffee F tastes like pineapple, that's all you'd taste, right? Like, you can put flavors in people's heads, and that's why tasting should be done quietly. And when you're making your assessment, you shouldn't be hearing other people's thoughts. It's so easy to be derailed, to be focused by something someone else said. And suddenly all that you could taste in this mysterious coffee is pineapple. And that's not what you want, right? So if you have one taste descriptor for a coffee, that's fine. If you have 20 taste descriptors in a coffee, that's also fine. I think you can DVR this one sorry, Mike has just left a comment saying he's a little bit far behind. I'm really sorry. This will be available afterwards to watch along if you're running really far behind and you don't want to get spoiled by what's coming. And again, I'll just say, if you're throwing into Super Chat, thank you. I'll match any donations that you give, so we'll double up whatever we get at the end of this and give it to World Coffee Research. So those of you donating, thank you, that's amazing. So to the 14 of you in Glasgow that threw in some money, thank you, super cool, thank you. All right, we're not done yet, because now these things are at a point where they're just much easier to taste. If you've stopped tasting, I want you to start again, right? I want you to go back to the beginning, clear your brain out, stop listening to me for a second. I'm going to stop talking for a couple of minutes and just taste. Okay? Take whatever notes you want, give whatever scores you want. It's all good. I just want you to pay attention and go A to B. Compare, contrast. B to C. Compare and contrast. I'm going to shut up for like 2 minutes. I'm going to taste, scribble some things down. I want you to do the same. There's a bunch of super chat questions. They are being captured. I will answer them once I've just finished taking some notes and you're doing the same at home. Oh, I missed the super chat saying that you want an ASMR of me slurping. I promise you don't. I don't know. Maybe you do. That's okay. Maybe we can do that one day. Just one super chat that I think is worth answering was there was a quick question about World Coffee Research. So it's a not-for-profit organization that is essentially trying to do research and science around specialty coffee and its longevity, right? Like there's a bunch of challenges faced on the producer side, right? It's focused only on producer side coffee stuff. It's not coffee research about roasting. It's not coffee research about brewing or drinking. This is really about coffee, making it a sustainable, viable crop for people so that we can keep roasting it and drinking it in the future. I went to some very early events as part of it, and they're doing great work. I'm a big fan. I have been for literally years. We support them at Square Mile, and you're all supporting them too now by slowly making me poorer. I now owe £75 to World Coffee Research, so please continue to make me more out of pocket. So thank you. But yeah, check out the website. I think it's worldcoffeeresearch.org. Encourage your local roaster to support them, right? Like put the pressure on the roasters, frankly. I think it should be on roasters to bear the brunt of this. So ask your local roaster if they are supporting. You can do a check-up system where you donate a few cents per pound of coffee that you roast, which is an appropriate way to sort of do that. So bigger roasters pay more. Yeah, I would say encourage wherever you can that to happen. So yeah, I'll just comment on Philip's super chat. Yes, climate change is a massive threat, a massive issue. Unfortunately, I'm not going to listen to you if you deny it. And I really hope those of you that are rationally paying attention to the damage that's being done to the planet will help in some way to contribute. So thank you, is all. Okay, a little bit more tasting. I know we've run on for 45 minutes now, which is kind of crazy. And before we reveal anything, I just actually want to introduce you to a few people here at Square Mile who have helped make this happen. There's a bunch of people actually here in the roastery, not here with me right now, because listening to like 20 people slurp would be really unpleasant. There's a big sort of a tasting happening inside our tasting room upstairs. So I'm going to slowly drag some people down here. So just a quick shout outs. Right at the very start of the stream, you might have seen Michael, who is helping me here. Michael doesn't work at Square Mile. He works with me on other projects and stuff. So he's running the stream and doing all the technical stuff on that end. So just did. Jem, I might just grab Jem, you've probably seen her in the chat. She's helping do a bunch of stuff. So Jem, can I borrow you for a minute? Come on, there's people are a bit shy here. That's okay. So Jem works at Square Mile, is incredible, and is helping me out today in the chat. You'll see her in the chat, looking after things, making sure I answer super chats. Thank you. We're going to try and get the roasters to come down in a little bit so you can meet all of them. I'm just going to have a quick run through and make sure that I haven't missed any super chats. Can I come on your podcast? Yeah, sure. Let's do that. Write me an email. I'm james@squaremilecoffee.com. Question of, could I make this a monthly event? It's a good question. We're thinking quite a lot at the moment about how to do this again in the future. It's really fun. It's a super surreal experience from my point of view, right? Like I'm talking to a camera and a light, and there's a couple of people in the room. And on the other end of it, there are 1,850-ish kind of people, which is kind of wild to me in every single way. So, yeah, oh wow, we're up to £120 raised. So I now owe £120 to World Coffee Research. Please keep making me poorer. I am very happy to donate my money. Thank you very much. I see another $10. Okay, thank you for donations from all over the world. This is awesome. And love back to you in the Coffee Collective basement, Christopher. Pineapple coffee needs to be a meme. Maybe it's going to be a meme. I don't know. Hopefully there's some people on the way down and some people looking at me from upstairs. I'm going to get distracted. So I just want to introduce you to a few more people when they get here. And then we're going to do a reveal. So once we reveal what the coffees are, I'm going to tell you what I taste, and it is going to ride. In some ways, it's going to sort of run over the top of what you taste, right? I'm probably going to put words in your head, and that's might be frustrating. So make sure you've got any and all notes that you would want down before I reveal coffees. So I see the roasters. There's a team of the roasting team here at Square Mile. Come on, where are you? Come on. This was a Herculean team effort, especially from the roasting team and the production team too. I hope Matt's coming down. So Adam, this is Tom. This is Tom, this is Courtney, hopefully they're all in there. So they roast coffee all the time at Square Mile. They do an incredible job. I'm delighted that I get to work with them. They're amazing. They made this taste good. They made sure that you're tasting the green coffee, right? You're tasting the coffee itself. You're not tasting flaws in roasting because they've done a great job in their execution. So, roasting team. Awesome, thank you very much. Show them some love. They do tons of hard work all the time. Is anyone else coming down? Are we getting anyone else? I'll take a Hesty, a Matt, anyone who's around, just send them down. All right. Oh, wow, you're making me poor. Okay, I owe £187 now. Thank you. Shouldn't have. Well, okay, I'll match it. I'll stay good to my word. £220, okay. Shall we do a reveal? Are you ready? Are you ready for a reveal? Do you want to know? I'll tell you what. What we'll do is, before I show you what it is, throw into the chat what you think A is. Have a guess. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. There's no wrong answer. Well, there's a right and wrong answer here. So throw that in there. I've got a few more of the team. So let's just bring a few people. I'm going to bring some more people out. I feel like everyone here at Square Mile worked harder than me at making this happen, so they deserve way more of the credit than I do. So I'll grab Matt. Come on out. This is Matt. So just keep coming. This is Matt. So head of production. This is Will. This is Gareth. So Will does wholesale stuff. Gareth does education and training. Ollie does wholesale stuff. And this is Flick. Felicity? Flick. Flick runs the company. A lot of people still think I do that. I don't. Flick runs the company and makes everything happen and makes this place amazing. So collectively, all of you, thank you for getting this out the door. This was incredible. This was really tough to actually get done. So they did incredible work, and I'm very grateful to every one of them. So yeah, thank you very much. Sweet. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. You can go and taste and hang out now and chill. And we're going to do a reveal. I see a lot of words on the screen. Okay. Coffee A is it's from Nicaragua. It's called Entre Rios, right? It's a small farm, I think, up in the very north of the country, up towards the border with Honduras. It's the sort of Mazonte is the sort of closest town. I think the region is Nueva Segovia. So it's a single producer. The altitude if you want to get into the stats, we can do the stats. About 1,500 meters, 1,530, I think. And so Alberto Javier Ramos is the producer. Now, I'm going to reveal them, and then I'll come back and I'll talk you through tasting them, right? So if you guessed right, well done. If you didn't guess right, that's okay. This was a little bit of a curveball, but I think it was a nice place to start. Okay, you're welcome to throw your guesses in for B. Are you ready? B? Let's do. So B is from a farm called San Lorenzo. It's in the Coban region of Guatemala. And this was, I really like this coffee actually. I'm not going to tell you why. We'll do that in a second. This is a Bourbon Couture mix in terms of varieties. I think this was Catuai. I don't think the varieties particularly matter here. I don't think that's what we're tasting too strongly. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a second. Again, a single estate, family owned. C. I suspect there'll be a lot of correct guesses for C. C is from Ethiopia. It's called Nanochala. It's actually from a collective of producers. I think back in 2004, 25 producers got together and started a cooperative called Nanochala. It's now got 400 members. I think it's in Jimma. My brain, no. Yeah, it's in Jimma. It's a lovely coffee. It's obviously regional land races, what we used to call heirloom, but heirloom's not really the right term. That's another discussion for another day. Oh, wow. Sorry, I've just seen that you've donated £412, so this is going to hurt me. But thank you. Essentially, that's amazing. D, let's reveal D. So D is Kenyan coffee. There was a guess pretty early on. That's a pretty correct guess. It's called Kiranga. It's actually from a small estate, I think about 10 acres. Someone in this room knows better than me. It's from the department just to the east of Nyeri. Now you see a lot of coffee, specialty coffee from Kenya comes from Nyeri, which is a very central region. This is from Kirinyaga, I think, which is just a county just next door to the east of that. And E. E is another coffee from Ethiopia. It is called Dambi Udo, and that's actually the name of the processing station. So this comes from a large number of producers that feed into that station, and the sort of selection and quality work is done there as well. So those are your 5 coffees. If you guessed right, damn good work. Damn good work. I'm proud of you. I don't know if I'd have got 5 out of 5, if I'm honest. I'd have guessed probably these 3, but I would have been, I'd have been unsure about these 2, which is, I think, a really important point. For a long time, we've tried to reject, as an industry, like talking about country of origin too much, because there's just so much variety in so many countries. Right? And while there is a sort of style, often say Kenyan coffees, Guatemala can produce a huge range of flavors, right? So if you like Guatemalan coffees, then you like a lot of different stuff. Anyway, I just need to catch up on my super chats real quick, because you've been donating madly, which is amazing, so thank you. My daughter is watching too and wants to know if you are the best coffee man in the world. I am not. Not even close. I am a passionate amateur like many of us here. I love it, but there are so many people who know and have done so much more than me, so not even close. Can I do videos in WCR? I would like to, actually. There's sort of vague conversations happening around that. So yes, that's in the works. Videos about these coffees are one of them. I would love to make that. I'd love to make so many videos outside of the UK about coffee. I think coffee has such a rich, incredible story globally. I don't have the budget right now, but I'm working on it. I've got plans, I've got big ideas, but I'm making no promises. But it would be amazing to do something like that. Roaster in Fort Worth, asking a question about the prime time for cupping after you roast. Okay, without getting super technical on this one, we cup the day after because it's an important part of QC, and sometimes we have to cup the same day if we're not entirely sure how that roast went. If we have some questions, we'll cup it before we send it out to anybody. By and large, if you've just roasted some coffee and you've packed it and sealed it, it will get better over the next week or so. If you're going to brew espresso, a little bit more rest is often advisable, but it depends how warm the environment you're storing the coffee in is. We're at like nearly 20 days off roast here. And I think, these have held up very well. They've been properly packed. Hopefully you've all looked after them too. Tons of aroma, tons of flavor. Nothing tastes stale here. But you might have had like a little bit more vibrancy if it was, say, 7 days old. Okay, there's more podcasts. I will try and get on everyone's podcast. So, should we talk about taste? Should we talk about how these taste and why? Right, that's the fun bit. I'm going to talk about what I taste here. I'm not going to get super specific, right? I'm going to talk about some of the characteristics of this coffee, or each coffee, that stood out to me, about how I might think about them, how I might talk about them, if I liked them, what I might go looking for if I was looking to buy more coffee to drink and enjoy at home, right? So, Coffee A, the Entre Rios, I thought was a very friendly place to start, right? Like this, to me, is a very easy to enjoy coffee. It's not big, it's not loud, it's just kind of soft and sweet. Not a ton of acidity, some nice texture though, right? Like it's got a little kind of butteriness to me, I think would be the best description. And I kind of wrote some notes around sort of like a carameliness to it as well. This is very sweet, very friendly. I could drink a good amount of this first thing in the morning and have a really nice time. I'm just looking at the amount you've donated, and I'm going to get a little paler if you keep going at this rate. I will honor it, though. I'll post a screenshot when we make the donation, so you all know how that went down. But yes, now this is, I think, one of the lowest altitude coffees here. The higher you grow coffee, the colder the nights are, essentially. In the daytime, you get loads of sunlight, and that feeds the plant. And at nighttime, it's cold, and that slows down development. So you end up with more density in the coffee beans and often more interesting flavors, and also more acidity, right? Like that's the kind of correlation. And it means a lot of coffee people love acidity because it's a signifier of being grown high, having great sweetness, having great flavors, being complex and interesting. So, Entre Rios, 1,530 meters. It's definitely high enough to be clean tasting and sweet, but it doesn't have the acidity of a sort of higher grown coffee in there. I think it's very lovely. I think it worked really well as a starting point, though it might have frustrated some of you by not having a very obvious taste or character. It's just yummy. Sweet, caramelly, buttery, lovely. B. Now, as you go to B, there's an interesting contrast in a whole bunch of things. Now, you've gone up maybe a couple hundred meters, maybe a little bit more here. I think the farm is between about 1,700 and 1,800 meters. You've got a big increase in acidity as a result, right? Like it's a little bit juicier, a little bit more alive, zingier in a way. But it's got a kind of more of a cooked fruit quality to me. Like it's not a really fresh fruit thing. It's got a kind of jamminess to it in its fruitiness. I think it's lovely. With that, and I think emphasizing that kind of jamminess, it's got a bit more body, right? It's got a bit more texture. It feels a little bit richer. Coban is not a region that a lot of people talk about a lot in Guatemala. Historically, it's been difficult to access. It doesn't have the same kind of infrastructure. There are some stunning coffees from there, though, and I think this is one of them. This is very pretty. For me personally, it's a really nice combination of texture and fruitiness, right? Like it's not dominant fruit; it's just there for complexity, and I think it's yummy. Some disagree, and that's okay. You can dislike whatever you dislike. 3. So here, the big, most obvious change, to me anyway, is texture, right? We went from a reasonably rich thing, I mean, not heavy, but like a little fuller, into something very light, very delicate, right? And generally, when you hit these kind of coffees, if you see this kind of floral, tea-like kind of quality, then inevitably your brain's probably going to think about Ethiopia, right? And rightly so. The coffees from that part of the world are lovely, right? Where they often are a little bit lighter, a little bit more delicate, and often roasters will roast them in a way to highlight that. I think that's true here. So flavor-wise, it's a little floral. It's also a little citrusy too. I think it's a nice combination of those things. I wouldn't say it's the extreme kind of bergamot, Earl Grey tea that some Ethiopian coffees can do, but I think it's lovely. I think it's really enjoyable. Just coming back, there was a quick question about why there was no coffees from Southeast Asia. One, to be honest, right now, most of the best of those coffees that I've tasted never leave those places. Like some of the best Indonesian coffees I've had in a long time, I had in Jakarta. Secondly, we don't buy that many. It's never historically been a big part of how we purchase. And off the top of my head, I'm not even sure what the seasonality situation is with them. I feel like they're in season a lot of the year, actually. But yeah, that's why there's nothing from Southeast Asia. Plus, we only had 5 coffees, and we knew we wanted to hit certain things in the sort of lineup here for you. So C, I wrote delicate, kind of floral citrus. I wrote pretty, because I think that's a nice descriptor, and it's true. I think it's a pretty coffee. D, this one, the first thing you'll probably notice is acidity. There's a massive jump in acidity. It's bright and it's juicy, but it's like a fresh fruit, right? It's ripe, but it's fresh. It's real. It's not like a cooked down jammy type fruit. It's a much brighter, sharper, fresher kind of acid, which I think is really lovely. These are kind of coffee people coffees, right? Like because we love that high acid, we love that zing, we love all of that flavor. I don't necessarily want to drink this at 6 a.m. when I get up in the morning. I often want something maybe more like this, just to kind of welcome me into the world gently. And maybe at like 11 a.m. or like 2 in the afternoon, I want something interesting, something that I can pay attention to and be rewarded for my attention. Coffees like this, I think, are really lovely and sweet. It's a mix of varieties, so there's the kind of SLs in there, the SL28, SL34. SL is short for Scott Labs, a company that did a bunch of research on variety development, I think in the 50s. He says, I know I should know, but my brain doesn't give me everything all the time. There's a couple of other varieties in there as well, but those varieties, I think, are R11 and Batian, both of which are developed around disease resistance, about rust resistance, sorry. But historically, they haven't tasted great. I think this tastes lovely, and there's no evidence of those kind of lower quality kind of flavors in there. It's juicy, it's sweet, it's yummy. Sorry, that's a gentle slurp, not too many more. And then E. Now, these coffees here, these 4, are all washed. So after the coffee is picked and it's ripe, the seeds are squeezed out. They're fermented and then either underwater or in the air to break down any of the sticky kind of fruit, flesh, mucilage we call it, that's stuck to the seed, and then that's washed away, leaving a very clean-looking seed still covered in a kind of papery parchment layer. That process is favored because it reduces the possibility for a defect happening after harvest. Right, like it's popular around the world because it's the least likely to damage the value of the coffee after it's been harvested. Typically, it does also give a little bit more acidity, kind of more clarity in the cup. Now, the other end of the spectrum is E, which is a naturally processed coffee. That coffee was picked and dried as a whole cherry before, when it's fully dry, then being hulled. Right? When you dry a piece of fruit in the sun, there are typically some flavors developed in that process through some sort of fermentation, right? So you end up with very distinct characteristics to the coffees. Now, some people love this, and that's okay. Like, they really love those kind of tropical, funky kind of flavors. It had a bit of strawberry to me, both kind of fresh and fake as a description. It does have a little less acidity. It's got a bit more texture to it as well. But there are also a category of people that really struggle with that kind of fermenty flavor, and that's okay. It's a kind of love-hate thing. It's a Marmite thing. If you really dislike this, I would be very hesitant to recommend you buy naturally processed coffees in the future, because that's pretty common as a kind of flavor characteristic in them. Now, they get much worse. As naturals go, I think this one is pretty clean and sweet. It doesn't have a bunch of off flavors. They can smell really disgusting. They can smell like the worst of a farmyard. They can smell funky and wild and weird, but they can also just smell terrible. For a lot of people, that kind of blueberry, bubblegum kind of quality to them is one of the first times that coffee really has a strongly identifiable thing, and they really, really love that. And I remember my first natural, and I was kind of blown away by how different and how interesting it was. And I also really liked them in espresso too. How you feel about them may change over your lifetime as a coffee drinker, but those kind of flavors are very strongly tied to one particular process. Just going to quickly jump in and answer a couple of questions. Okay, so a question that's a great question, which is when brewing coffee regularly, you feel like it's hard to get those characteristics. I'll tell you one of the biggest reasons why. There's two main reasons. The first reason is that you're lacking some contrast, right? Like it's the ability to go from A to B, B to C that actually highlights those characteristics so clearly. And secondly, paper filtering does kind of clean up a cup a little bit, right? It kind of often improves a cup for some people, like they like the cleanliness of that. But that's, I think, the two reasons why you wouldn't get the characteristics as strongly in brewing. Someone asked about getting hold of these coffees. Would they be available as a bundle? We have some pretty limited amounts of these left because you all bought most of them and are drinking them right now. So thank you for that. We'll try and do what we can in terms of people being able to buy this again in the future, or potentially do something like this again in the future once we've figured out how to overcome some of the challenges behind that stuff. Okay, did I miss anything here? I love that I'm seeing like Korean in the chat. So if you're cupping in Korea, thank you for staying up so late. That's amazing. Okay, I'm going to now recommend that you have one more pass, right? If you want to take some notes, do that kind of stuff, and if you have notes to share. In the description of this video, there are two links, one that says read this first and then one below that. The one below that takes you to a page on the Square Mile blog with a simple Google form. Like I said, I don't want to ask too much. I'm not asking for your name. I don't want your email address. I don't want to sell you anything. I want to know where in the world you are, how many of you tasted together, whether you work in coffee or not, whether you've done this before. If you could rank these coffees by preference, that would be very helpful, right? So I'm just interested in which is everyone's favorite overall. Below that, there's a slightly odd question. And essentially what I'm trying to get at is, which of these would you drink day to day, right? If I dropped bag off, would you drink it or not, right? If you really loved this and really hated this, then say yes to this, no to this. But if you also thought these were okay, then say yes, right? But I'm just interested in kind of, I guess what we would call acceptance, right? Like, are you into it, or are you not? Would you drink it, would you not? This will all make sense in the future. Below that, there are 5 text input boxes. Please share as few or as many words about each of the coffees as you'd like. If you don't want to do that, if you could just throw in on those first few questions, I'd love to know how many people actually took part in this all around the world. Getting some data on that would be super helpful. If you're watching this not live, not with the rest of us, not with the 1,700 plus people, 1,800 plus people that took part, I hope you have some fun. One quick question that I will answer, what is my favorite? Probably 3 or 4. I like everything. I drink less natural processed coffees than I do washed coffees out of preference, but mostly because I drink most of my coffee first thing in the morning. And I think these 3 would be how I choose to start a day more often, and probably this sometimes too, actually. This is not a good answer, is it? C. Let's say C. C it is. I will post into the description of somewhere. I'll find a place to put all the info about the coffees up for you, probably at jameshoffman.co.uk. I'll probably put something up there because I don't want to leave it in the description of this because there are still people who haven't tasted yet, and I don't want to give the game away if they read the description. So that's coming up pretty soon. Someone just threw in $100. Wow. Okay. So you have raised £678 right now. So I personally now owe £678 because I was stupid enough to say that I would match it, but I will be a man of my word and I will match it. So right now we're looking at donating a little bit over £1,300, which is, worth less these days with our currency, but about $1,500, $1,600/euros. So that's amazing. There's still donations coming in. You're all awesome. So that's the donation total right now. The next time I do a live cupping, I don't know. We've got a bunch of questions. What we'll try and do as soon as possible is get this file saved and uploaded online. If you want to go back and watch a bit from before or capture some bit of it there, it'll be available pretty soon. In terms of how these were roasted, I'll see if I can post some roast profiles online. They're not hugely helpful. They were roasted on this roaster here, which is a 15 kilo Probat from, I think, 1968. This is our 75 kilo back here behind me. Yeah, I think we're aiming for, philosophically speaking, development, so they taste sweet and they taste pleasant, and they don't taste kind of green and kind of grassy in any way. I think we don't mind sacrificing a little bit of acidity, but we try not to run into kind of any kind of generic roast flavors, right? Like we sort of have a kind of generic toastiness or any kind of extra bitterness that comes from that. So they were roasted quite differently. The Entre Rios needed a little bit more heat at the start, I think. It was just quite different. Something like this Kenyan coffee will roast super differently to this natural here. Like they will roast very differently. And the 4 people you met on the team before who roast coffee here work super hard to make those delicious. And would I drink any of these as espresso? I think we're currently doing this one and the Nanocella as espresso, but we roast it differently for espresso. When it's roasted this light, I think it's very pretty, very floral. By the time that you extracted it and concentrated it into an espresso, it would be unbalanced in terms of its acidity. It would be pretty overwhelmingly acidic at that point. So yes, I agree. JC Yorkshire, thank you to the Square Mile team. They did amazing work. If you have been let down and you weren't able to taste along with us because your pack didn't arrive, I'll say again, please, please, please get in touch with us. We want to make it right. We have tried our best, and postal services around the world have kind of been difficult, but we want to make you happy. We appreciate your support. We appreciate you taking part. We want to make sure that you get a set and can do this with us. So yeah, please, please, please get in touch. Okay, I think we're getting towards the end. I appreciate your time today. You've given me 75 minutes of your time, and I'm extremely grateful for that. I didn't think we'd run this long. I'm going to close down the chat in a minute because you keep giving us money. We're at £774, so that is over £1,500 raised for World Coffee Research. You're amazing. If you're watching this later, whenever, I'll just say thank you. Thank you to everyone who hosted a public cupping, who has who's shared this experience with like 10, sometimes 20 people. I've heard reports all over the world. Those of you who got up super early in the morning, you're amazing. Those of you who stayed up super late at night, you're amazing. And those of you in the UK, thanks for not going outside, because it's a beautiful day today, and there was more fun things to do out there. But if you took part, thank you so much. I think I'm going to step away from this stream. I'm going to say thank you for taking part. We broke a record. We did the world's biggest coffee tasting. I'm pretty sure we own that record now. You're a record holder as much as me. So all of us, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.